Hello and welcome to the Ori Spotlight podcast. I'm Jason Foster. I'm going to be your host today. With me on this edition of the Spotlight is Stuart Milne, the CTO of Ori. Welcome, Stuart.
Thanks very much, Jason. Hi, all.
Great to have you on today. You're the second Ori employee we've had able to join us on the Spotlight. So we had Farland, as you know, talking about the origin story of Ori and how we got started as a company. Stu, you spent your career working at the kind of intersection of technology and science, bringing engineering and biology together in various ways. I'd love to hear about your kind of academic and work journey before you joined Ori and how you ended up where you are today.
I think how I'd really characterize myself is an engineer through and through. I'm a geek. I always have been. I've been fascinated by technology, its application, and that's been consistent all the way through childhood and then through university, where I was fortunate to study in Cambridge, where the engineering degree is a generalist degree. You learn all disciplines, be that mechanics, electronics, software, materials. And so it gave me a very broad understanding of a lot of the building blocks that you need to basically develop products. After my PhD, where I was working in MEMS and nanotech, I went into product development consultancy, which was an area I was able to use all of these skills in pulling these different sensors, analytics, mechanisms, and devices together to produce things to fulfill need, really. And in product development, it spans anything really, from consumer devices all the way through to med tech. And that was the direction that I found most joy in. And so I spent a lot of time trying to refine my skills in medical device development, and worked on a few products, got them through to market. And really about 10 years ago, an opportunity came up to get involved in cell and gene therapy via a startup in Cambridge that specialized in cryogenic freezing. And they were looking for someone to come in and head up the engineering development there to develop a new suite of controlled rate freezers that were uniquely designed for the cell and gene therapy space. And it was a very exciting opportunity. And as soon as I joined the industry, I had so much fun, learned so much. It's really been inspirational, and learned an awful lot through that time, and have seen a few trends come and go in the industry, but primarily seen the industry just build momentum and the opportunity that it presents. It's an exponential growth, and to be involved in the industry from that point in the sort of like the late 2000s to now, it's quite thrilling. It's exciting. And when I first became aware of Ori and what they were trying to do, it was quite arresting to me. It was very interesting to see a team of people who were so singly focused on trying to solve one of the most important challenges of cell and gene therapy. And that nucleus of talent and resource opportunity, and also the investors that they've managed to pull together, was extremely exciting. And, as well, we were talking for a bit of time before we have actually managed to get our stars to align and for me to come and wear this mantle that I've got now. But it's super exciting. I mean, it's a little bit of a turbo drive through how I find myself here, but I think the thread that runs through it all is one of enjoying solving problems, enjoying the kind of problems that exist here, and the application of solving those problems. It's not just problems for problem's sake. It's about actually developing complex things, getting them to market, and getting them making a difference.
Absolutely. Now, a couple interesting threads there to pull on a little bit more in this discussion. I would say you're a little bit of an adrenaline junkie. In your free time, you like to ride bikes and to great heights and do CrossFit and other things. But you also, as you said, this isn't your first startup. You like that kind of, early building phase. So interested kind of what you've learned a little bit along the way in building Asymptote and exiting that business, and, what parallels you see as the industry is evolving, and, the kind of skills that you're bringing about to Ori that are, kind of relevant to our journey.
No, understood. I mean, I think that adrenaline junkies may be a bit firm. I like to make sure I don't snap. So I have a healthy fear that I like to bring in, but I think mine comes in a little bit later than a lot of other people, and that may also be correlated. I think the similarity that you're drawing with that kind of element of thrill seeking that I've got, and maybe the fact that you see me come back into a startup environment. I think there's quite a lot of truth in that. Um, I think when I look back to my more recent career and working with Asymptote, that company that was starting up in cryogenics, when I joined that firm, we were very, very small. I was the second person in there. We had an element of funding, but we were effectively bootstrapping the company. We were living hand to mouth. It was it encouraged a huge amount of rigor and discipline in everything that we did. It was a challenging environment, very, very exciting. I personally got to the point in my career now where this kind of opportunity, I think, is a better fit. I think some of the challenges that you might have to deal with in a really small company are not quite as exciting as the ones that we're going to have to deal with here. I'm much more excited at the challenge of scaling up, the challenge of ramping up bigger suppliers and bigger volumes, and doing so with a much bigger stick is something that I can do in Ori now, which we couldn't have done in Asymptote. That it's just interesting when I compare the thrill that you get is it's a similar thrill, but coming from different places. And this one is one very much of, we are standing on a big hill right now. We are putting a target on our backs to deliver and to make a change to this industry. And that is really exciting, versus maybe the route that I've come through before was a lot more stealth. The problems that we were having were a lot more internal, and how we sort of bootstrapped our way up that hill. And so it's very different. Very much feels like all eyes are on us at the moment. And that's actually, for an extrovert at times, that's quite thrilling. That's quite fun. That's where we are.
Well, I don't know if I have the room to talk, being that this is my third or fourth startup, depending on how you count them. But there is something exhilarating about the early phases of a company where you're building something that has potential to have lasting impact. And we're at a very exciting time with the company, as you know. And you also had the opportunity to view the company from the outside before joining. And I wonder what were the triggers that led you to want to join Ori? I know it was a bit of a long courtship, as you had mentioned, but we were able to attract some of the top talent in the industry, yourself included. And I wonder, what is it from the outside looking in that's exciting about the opportunity that Ori's trying to tackle?
Yeah, many things. Certainly, the original hook for me was, clearly for me, one thing I was definitely looking for was working in this space. I've made a decision that cell and gene therapy is just the industry that for me is most exciting. We'll probably come on to some of the reasons more about that later in this call, and we'll talk about it then. But so very much that was the net that I would be casting, would be in this industry, and given that, really it was the people. The first people that I spoke to understand their vision, their mission. Yourself, Farlan, other members of the company who I spoke to, you could see the caliber of the team was exceptional, and I find that very exciting. Having worked in environments around really high performers and seeing what can be achieved in a limited amount of time with a limited amount of resource, and you compare that to what can happen if the talent pool gets a little bit more diluted, a little bit more distributed. That to me is why I chase the thrill, I chase the speed, I chase the intensity and the challenge. I enjoy working with people who are quicker than me and faster than me and push me in different ways and know things I don't know. And very much, everybody I spoke to at Ori, I would see and learn different things. And that for me was really when the hooks were put in. What I would say is, beyond that, as we say, it wasn't an easy courtship. I had a lot of introspection. I had a great time with my previous career with Cytiva, They're a great team. I really loved it there, and making this move was a big one. What the way that I looked at it, and why ultimately this was the decision I took, was I really looked around the company much in the same way that I think a lot of investors do coming into something like the Series B or the Series A raise. I was looking at the IP position, I was looking at the competitive analysis in the landscape, I was looking at the macro in this industry, and for me, I took a decision that I was going to be investing a large chunk of my career in Ori, and I was treating it like a real investment for me. And that's, do I believe in the mission? Do I believe in the industry? Do I believe in the team? Do I believe in the product? And I went through all of that. And when I came to the end of it, it actually wasn't a difficult decision. It was where I wanted to be.
No, it's great. I mean, we talk a lot internally about how do we maintain the talent density in the organization. We've all been on those high performing teams, whether it be kind of a school team or a sports team or a work team where you just all the cogs of the pieces fit together and you get you produce great results, great output, and those members of the team push you to do your best and be your best. And we can all remember what that feels like. And it's one of the super exciting things about this team at this time, and being able to do our best work and really ultimately achieve our mission as a company, which drives all of us. The ability to enable widespread patient access to this new generation of life-saving cell and gene therapies. And that's what motivates us all every day. So I think that calculation that you did, sort of going down the list of, well, is the right team in place, is the IP in place, is the opportunity there, and can I get passionate about this? It is very similar to the way investors think about opportunities. They're betting on the team, they're betting on the opportunity. And now that you're inside Ori, you have the opportunity to build your own team, and you've brought in some great talent to work on your team. And I'd love to hear more about some of the great work that they're doing and some of the talent you're looking to bring into the organization from here.
Well, thank you. And for sure, I mean, I couldn't be more thrilled with, what we've managed to achieve in a very short amount of time since I've been here. Ori has a hugely capable, biology team, and we continue to leverage that and learn an awful lot from that. And that's how we keep really at the forefront of the science. But really, my joining the company was the first sort of dyed in the wool, real engineering product development expertise to come through. And it's my remit to build out the product development team. And in doing so, now made my first wave of hires. Got some very experienced team members in product development, calling out names. Mark Varley, who's come to us, absolute bioreactor specialist, again, similar educational background to myself. So he has got huge domain knowledge, not only in the industry space, the products, but also from a quality and regulatory as well. He's heading up the hardware design and is currently building out his team for mechanical design engineers and hardware engineers. I have Chris Rowe, who's joined us, heading up the manufacturing engineering. Again, a multidisciplinary engineer who specialized actually in manufacturing engineering tripos in Cambridge. So he specializes really in the, not only taking a design, but how do you scale that into manufacturing, and how do you ensure that you can do that in a high reliability and a scalable way, using all of the, the tools and the processes that we need to do. He's doing a fantastic job. It's really exciting to have him on. Certainly, Ori has been very much in a development phase, and bringing Chris in is really the first. It's the first step in us becoming a manufacturing company. We're starting to look beyond the development phase now, right? We are now spooling up the engines and getting the CMOs in place, and he's an absolute linchpin in the corner there. And Massam has come in on the software, really exceptional software engineer. We've got to set up all of our systems and ensure that a lot of the digital interplay and the connectivity pieces that we're working on play together. And super thrilled to have them all on board, basically. And from here, we as soon as the Series B is announced, we've got another hiring round going on. This is now my second wave, and we're looking for really exceptional people to come and join us, come and join the team in electronics design areas. And we're looking for people to run the manufacturing group, looking for electronics engineers and software engineers, and actually at all levels. And people who are interested in working in this kind of product space, in this kind of environment. Even if something that you see on the careers page isn't a direct fit to what you're doing, if you've got an interest in this kind of space, it's like, or people, we'd love to hear from them, because we just want the best people here that we can work with and try to achieve cool things, really.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned quality and that the fact that Misha predated you here, but obviously you're working very closely with the quality and regulatory team as part of your broader group to make sure that everything we do has that kind of quality overlay and our ability to translate what's been an R&D focus into a commercial focus, as you were saying, in a high quality way with our partners.
That's a great point. I mean, it's a huge other pillar of the company, and as you say, Amisha's been doing a fantastic job. She predates me. She's taking on the mantle to put in place the right QMS system that we need, not only through development but manufacture, and is standing up an awful lot of systems in really forward-looking, scalable ways, and that's what we're trying to do across the board. It's to ensure that as we transition through this development phase and we hit manufacturing, that the organization and the company that we're building now is not just one of development of individual products. It's about ensuring the entire company will scale and meet the demands of our customers, supply chain, regulators, that we're just there, the pieces are in place. And I guess coming back to the top of the call, when we talk about the industry and the direction we see it going, if things go well, we are planning for quite significant uptake happening quite quickly, and that sort of exponential growth. It's important we put the pillars in place now, and that's where having, someone as focused and as detailed and experienced as Amisha is incredibly helpful.
Absolutely. Got to build the house on a strong foundation. So you mentioned as part of your intro that you were early to cell and gene therapy, late 2000s. You've been in it for 10 plus years. There's been a lot of changes in that time in the industry. It's sort of matured somewhat, but yet still in the early innings, people will say. We're still kind of early in this new pillar of medicine. And I wonder, what is your view on how the mindsets have shifted over that kind of 10 years or 10 and a bit years? And, why is now such an important time for innovation in cell and gene therapy? I mean, you've seen the nascence of the industry, the kind of beginnings of it before any approved products to now, where we've got, 6 or 8 approved cell therapies and, let's say 20, maybe cell and gene therapies broadly, but thousands and thousands being studied currently. So I wonder what your view is on how we've matured, where we've been, where we've come from, and why is now such an important time for innovation really to come to the fore?
It's a sort of confluence of a few factors I see. Certainly, like when I was first in the industry, a lot of the focus was on allo platforms for treatment of acute injury. There's things like stroke treatments, treatments for like heart attack. Can you have allogenic progenitor cells that you could inject to just, for people coming in, presenting in hospital? Would this help them recover? Looking at allo treatments for things like, cartilage and, tendons and things like this, these kind of long-term degenerative diseases that were, allo showed great promise. And super exciting work. I am sure that these areas are going to come back in spades. But what happened really, obviously, was the work in UPenn, right? And, seeing the CAR T treatments come through those first results. And all of a sudden, the industry had to sit up and listen. We've moved from a lot of laboratory work trying to work on, allo platform technologies that were going to be targeted to treat a lot of either acute injury or like long-term health problems. And suddenly we had this customized, personalized treatment that would treat an individual's cancer. And it actually was just working. So that for me was very disruptive. You see the ripple through the industry. And what happened was, as soon as that happened, even though those individual treatments were so expensive, they were curative. And not only were they curative, but we are trying to develop and commercialize an entirely new domain of medicine when you're injecting living cells into humans. So when I was first in the industry, veterinary was a lot of the application, right? If you're trying to fix something like a tendon, it's very difficult to even get the trials data that you want in human. It's unethical. You couldn't do it. So even though the science might have been there, you're actually having to look at these sort of adjacent areas, and it was veterinary science where you might be able to try some of these things and there'd be a bit of learning. And then suddenly this juggernaut came through, which was CAR T, where the ethical challenge of infusing or injecting live cells into somebody was overcome because these people were terminally ill, final stage. And it's like, whoa, this is a shot in the dark, but this might work. Let's give it a go. And dang, it worked. And that for me was really interesting because as soon as that happened, it was like a light bulb moment in the CGT space. And that's a light bulb moment that's atop quite a few things that had happened before. You look back at CRISPR, you look back at IPS and all of these things going on, but it was that as soon as you were able to curatively demonstrate the efficacy of these drugs in humans and it showed persistence, that's where the money flowed. Because even at that time, you could see it was way too expensive. Suddenly the pharma companies could sit up and listen. And I think the last 10 years have really been characterized by that. It's been a realignment of where the investment in the industry has been going from trying to look at, shall I say, super wide market, not quite so critical things, like which pharma was pretty well versed in trying to tackle. Those models were much more similar to, here's some ibuprofen, we got loads of pills on the shelf, we send them around. And so for me, that's it, that, this stuff comes through, the investment then follows the scientific potential, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so now what's happening is the cost of goods are starting to come down. People like Ori are coming in as, it's one of our key areas of focus is to enable more of these technologies by addressing that problem of cost. It's like, we know the technology works. Now it's a problem of cost and deployment. And that's for me the exciting thing is it's like it's this confluence of the science, of the regulatory interplay. There's some ethics to go with to ensure that these clinical trials could take place. But then as time's gone on, the regulators have also had to, adopt. And, we spoke about some of the work that Amisha's been doing, and you were doing, going to the FDA to go and speak to them about can we talk to us about what is going to be the release strategy of these drugs? How do you want to treat these drugs in a manufacturing environment? Because we've gone well beyond now, how do we manufacture and deliver these drugs by, compassionate use effectively, to now, we're building an entire regulatory pathway for approved drugs. It's everything coming together. So it's super exciting time.
Yeah, it's moved away a little bit from a cottage industry, transplantation that happens at the hospital or some kind of regen med type, more boutique-y therapies to things that need to work at industrial scale. And that's a whole new challenge, but super exciting to have a big impact. When you're dealing with, a couple patients a year, it's a whole different beast than trying to serve, 10,000 or, 100,000 or something like that. So agreed. I think that, now we're at that critical inflection point. Yeah, we've proven out the clinical and scientific case for cell and gene therapies, but we're really struggling with the commercial case. Can we make them widely available? Can we make them cost effectively? Can we make them the same way every time, minimizing variability? These are all challenges we don't know the answer to yet. In order to create a robust, industrializable process that serves lots of patients, we need to answer those questions. And that's why I think, innovation is so important right now. And what Ori's up to is critical and has the potential to really have a significantly positive impact on the industry. Let me shift gears a little bit just to kind of call on your experience a little bit to say, obviously the life sciences industry generally, or the biopharma industry, is risk averse, conservative, slow to adopt new technologies. I think that's, and for good reason. Inertia is built into the system so that, to make sure we don't move too fast and make sure people don't get hurt. But I think, some technologies like, adoption of the cloud or the use of, advanced analytical tools like, you know, machine learning or uh, artificial intelligence, these kinds of things. These have been utilized and adopted across lots of regulated industries, energy, banking, but have been slow to be adopted in the life sciences industry. And I wonder what, with your experience designing, launching, commercializing these kinds of discoveries, um, what have you learned about how we can be kind of appropriately ahead of the curve in trying to help the industry make advances, but um, not threatening sort of, we don't use the word disruptive technologies in life sciences because disruption sounds scary, but it's sort of bringing kind of new innovations to market. How do we do that in a way that's makes sense and that adheres to our, quality and regulatory mission?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that there's no single answer. Um, it, the way that I approach it is, I tend to think of different customers in quite different ways. I stratify customers and application areas, and they think about things differently. Um, from a tech perspective, the capability that we can demonstrate, the features that we've got, will have different utility for accounts at different stages of their life cycle. So quite often the startup companies or the smaller companies that will be our customers can be extremely flexible to use the latest features and some of the next gen tech that we've got, and they will adopt it early. And what I might expect to see is some of the larger pharma companies that we work with, they will already have very set up rigorous ways of doing things. And some of the features and some of the things that we can do may not easily directly slot into what they're doing or the way that they think. So I think it's important that we can meet, the requirements of both sides. And what tends to happen over time is that the people who are able to adopt the more agile, the more flexible, the more next gen capability, it feeds up. It just takes that little bit longer. It's the inertia you speak of. Um, in some of the larger companies that you might work with who have already got very established ways of working, changing digital infrastructure can be quite, it's a very big project for them to take on, right? They will have large infrastructure, large ways of doing things, and it's about effectively getting out there and showing the value of what we're doing in other areas, and they will see it, and then they will adopt it, and they will have to adopt it. So I think the answer to it is you do both, and you don't try and force either to do the wrong thing because you won't manage. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think we've been down this road. We understand kind of what it takes, and it takes a bit of patience and quite a lot of effort and forward thinking to understand what the needs of specific customers at specific stages, and the needs of a small therapeutics developer are very different from those of a large CDMO or a large academic research center. So, being able to tailor the offering, I think, is quite important, as you said, and understand the constraints they're operating under. One of the things that I'm excited about us being able to solve for is, we consistently see giant investments being required in facility, in human resources, and in technology upfront before maybe anyone even has an approved product. It's kind of, we have to figure out, are we going to manufacture ourselves, or how many people do we need? Where are we going to do that? And some of there's some in the industry that would argue that that's not the core competency of biopharma companies. It's something that they've had to do and develop, but their real core competency is the research and development of the therapeutics, and sort of all the other downstream stuff is a is a consequence of needing to develop those things to actually make their products. But the opportunity to potentially allow for those innovators to spend less time thinking, worrying, and investing in infrastructure, and allowing them to focus all of their attention on the development of new and effective and safe therapeutics, could be quite disruptive and quite an advantage. We've seen more than one example of a therapy company investing in a huge facility that they never moved into. Investing tens of millions of dollars of their very limited capital, because they needed to manufacture, or they thought they would need to, and maybe they didn't get the approval when they thought, or they, things didn't work out. So I think these new paradigms that we're helping to pioneer are important to allow for optimal outcomes, eventually, which is what we're searching for. One of the things that we talked about, or you alluded to rather, is kind of the ways of doing things in the past might need to be rethought as we look at cell and gene therapy, as we look at the learnings, maybe even post COVID. Things like supply chain, for example, has been a big concern and a big challenge for those in our industry. We know that there's some of the key ingredients to some commercial GMP processes that just aren't available. They're on back order for months and months, maybe. What have we learned? As our chief technology officer, obviously supply chain is one of your remits, or that fits under you. What has Ori learned, and how we think about partnering with organizations and bringing solutions to market from some of the things that have happened over the last couple of years?
I think the main lesson that I think the whole industry's learned recently is, what you thought you knew may no longer hold true, and primarily, especially in electronics and raw materials. Um, where we are at the moment, a lot of the work that Ori's been doing has clearly been on development. We're transitioning into that manufacturing phase now. Um, Developing a product in COVID is it has got its challenges. You do end up with longer lead times around certain things, and you roll with those punches, and they are what they are, and you do your best to work around them. But far more critically for me, it's actually that prep and that planning for the production and how you handle it. And there is no perfect answer, I think, with all of these things. Fundamentally, there's always a trade-off. There always has been a trade-off with these things. It's the classic fight between, you know, working capital, inventory, lead time, forecast predictions of ordering. How do you trade off these risks, right? And I think what we've seen shake out the market is, over the last couple of years, that there were probably a lot more failure points in a lot more supply chains than people realized, especially in life sciences and bioprocessing. And, the initial response has been to, really look at guarding raw materials and inventory, putting those numbers up. It's sucking in cash flow, and that's fine. And I think things will shake out a bit more over the coming years as things get restabilized and people understand a bit more where the risks are. But I think it's been a very interesting time for a lot of manufacturing companies at the moment. And there are a lot of lessons learned over the last couple of years. Those lessons are ones that we, fortunately, to a certain extent, Ori wasn't in manufacturing a year ago, or I think we would have also made some of the mistakes that I think some of our competitors have made, because it's been a tough time for everybody. But we're coming through it now, I think. I think the supply chains are opening up. The new normal is being established, I think.
I mean, one of the things that I've learned along the way, just in time isn't just in time anymore. This idea of, global supply chains, they exist, they will exist in the future. But, if you have a mission critical piece of or componentry that you are supplying a partner, you need to make sure that, you've got redundancy in the system. You've got inventory to supply. We have clinical trials that can't go forward, patients who can't get treated because some of those key components aren't available. So, I don't want to be in competition with my partners for resources. For my customers, I don't want to be developing my own therapeutics. I want to be enabling their therapeutics, and I don't want to be in competition for the raw materials necessary to deliver their products. I want to make sure that I have inventory on the shelf so that they can count on us to deliver when we have to. And this is more of a philosophical learning than it is anything else. And yeah, there's trade-offs, as you said, on working capital and these kinds of things. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're enabling products to save lives. And if we don't do that, then those lives don't get saved. And you know, that's not a trade-off that I'm willing to make. So I think it's a philosophical learning that we've had and that the industry's had, and we need to adapt to that. These sort of things that were perceived to be black swan events, can actually, they're not as thin tail as we thought. They do happen, and they could happen again in the future. So, um, switching gears a tiny bit, just thinking about those models of the future. As we said, today's world is centralized manufacturing in the way that we have done for biologics, for small molecules, manufacturing in one place. And we've tried to replicate that model through, for the cell and gene therapy industry, for these kind of advanced therapies. And we're realizing some of the limitations of that. When you're dealing with variable inputs coming from, living cells, coming from patients, that we have a closed loop supply chain. They start with the patient, they end with the patient. It gives us some new challenges to overcome. And one of the things that, certainly Ori is very interested in is how do we potentially enable manufacturing closer to the patient? The ability to kind of cut down on some of the supply chain challenges, the logistics, the time associated with that. Um, and how does that, that thinking potentially, from your perspective, impact, our technical outlook, our development? How are we thinking about ultimately being site agnostic as to where products get manufactured, but really trying to power the next generation of potentially distributed manufacturing, where there might be centers of excellence or manufacturing at the hospital that allows us to front run some of those issues and return high quality therapeutics back to patients much more quickly and a much lower cost.
I think where it starts is that's our vision. I think that's the critical thing. Is that's very much where Ori sees the future of the industry and how we get to that point of enabling wide access to these therapies. And what that means is, we talked a little bit about the cloud architecture, the distributed data platform that we're putting as the backbone to the product. That's one half of how, by starting off with that in mind, we are already laying the groundwork. So, multi-site manufacturing can occur in a tightly controlled way. The other part of it, I think, comes to, it's a bit like you say, we have the cottage industry. Really, what we're trying to do is to enable a process that would have taken 5 or 6 PhD, chemical biological grads to handhold through 3 weeks of processing, to something that, a well-trained, skilled operator can do. And so what that means is if we play this through, we've got the data piece, but the actual instrument, the way that we provide this manufacturing capability on sites, we have to simplify it, we have to ruggedize it, and we have to minimize human touch points. And those human touch points, they need to be as simple as possible. I think if you combine those two things together, we create the beginnings of a platform that enables that kind of much more distributed manufacturing. And, we can really use, that's the beginning of how we layer more and more on top of it.
I 100% agree in that, it's sort of one of those things where we have to think holistically about this challenge. It's sort of, I said at Facilitate, I was on a panel with Bruce Levine and some of the guys from Resilience, and they said, well, people see automation as the future. Jason, what's your take on this? They put us kind of in the automation bucket. And I said, well, automation, I don't even like the word because it sounds to me like the robots are going to come in and save the day. It's sort of, you can imagine like a Battlestar Galactica kind of, bunch of robots marching in to save things. And it's so much more complicated than that. It's so much more integrated than that. The ability to, yeah, okay, robotics and automation, that's part of it. The full stack digital platform, that's part of it. The ability to control and create a repeatable process in a closed manner that can be done in a lower grade environment. That's part of it. And so it's really this kind of full stack approach of, just no one lever, pulling one lever is going to solve this problem. It's thinking about it holistically and how they pieces integrate together. Knowing that, the reason why distributed manufacturing might make sense is, we are starting with patient material and we want to cut the vein to vein time. We don't want it to be 3 or 4 weeks. We want it to be a week or less or a couple days. But then you think, well, how does QA and QC happen? Well, in today's framework, it can't really happen in that world, but how could it happen? We know some companies who are doing, batch release QA and QC by exception or continuous validation using paperless processes. So all of these things are possible. If you look at it through today's lens, they seem pretty fanciful, pretty far fetched. But if you think about, how far we've come with biologic manufacturing and, the things we've been doing in transplantation, you kind of a little bit of vision to see your way between those two things. It can happen. It can
For
happen.
sure. And I mean, we touched upon the regulatory framework changes as well, right? Like in the UK especially, there's a lot of guidelines around, multi manufacturing sites and how that plays together through the release process. And it's not a problem that Ori can solve on their own. It's a whole industry wide game, and what we're trying to do, I guess, is to try and, where possible, put ourselves in the room, be at the tables, be involved in some of these wider pieces, not just our customers, not just the regulators, but our suppliers, and even, I guess, primarily like our customers as well. Getting involved with a bit more closer to the clinics, closer to the areas of application of these things. And, it's very multifaceted problems we're trying to solve. And as you zoom out the different levels, you keep seeing different, different lenses, different ways of looking at things. And there's opportunity for improvement in all of these spaces. But it is, sometimes it's day to day, week to week, month to month, things might not have felt like they've moved that much. But when you take that moment to pause and reflect back and just think about what's actually gone on over the last year, 2 years, 5 years, it is actually amazing. It is all of these parallel swim lanes, some in our control, many not. They're all moving forwards, and it's ultimately being driven by the efficacy of the treatments and the promise of this new area of medicine, really.
For sure. Yeah, I think as an industry, we all want this to happen. And if we all want it to happen, then we'll find a way to make it happen. And I talk a lot about our ecosystem approach, which you referenced. Working with partners, trying to figure out how do we build integrated solutions, allowing each domain expert to add their value and to put them together in a package that makes sense, so that, again, therapy developers don't have to spend a lot of time worrying about digital systems or trying to make sure pieces of equipment work and talk to each other. That's not what they do best. They do other things best. And so let's invest some time and energy in that, and see if we can build on those partnerships. And that was one of my key takeaways from Facilitate a couple weeks ago in Miami. We had the opportunity to meet with many of our current partners, but also potential new partners. And there seems to be an openness to this kind of idea. I mean, you've been in the industry for a while. I think I'm not wrong if I were to say that it wasn't always the case that technology providers, played nicely in the sandbox together. There was quite a lot of concern about, the potential for, competition or IP leakage or whatever it is that they're concerned about. But I think, today's world is, we have realized that we're in this together. We have to work together. Otherwise, there's no one company that's going to be able to solve the whole problem. And so that willingness was very obvious to me, and the discussions and the panel discussions and presentations and the offline discussions we had in Miami, is that there's a lot of companies looking to bring their specific set of domain expertise to this problem, and to work cooperatively and collaboratively in trying to solve it. So that's a super exciting opportunity for us as an industry. You mentioned the progress that we made over the last kind of 5 years has been palpable. It's kind of obvious to see when you stop and look back. If I asked you to kind of cast your eyes forward another 5 years and say, well, I know it's your crystal ball's probably doesn't work any better than mine, but I wonder, what do you see for the next 5 years, or maybe even 10 years out, if you wanted to kind of, what would your ambition be for Ori, for the industry, in that kind of 5 to 10 year time frame?
I think, for me, probably one of the most exciting things that we're going to see over the next 5 years is the treatments that we've been able to give have always been like last line. The authorization has always been, again, coming right back to the beginning of this is really complicated, risky things potentially that you're doing in injecting live cells into somebody, that we've only, for very good reasons, been able to give these to people who are incredibly poorly as a last ditch attempt. As we build more and more evidence and more data to show that that is safe and it is efficacious, we can start using it earlier in the treatment pathway. And for me, the really exciting thing there is that we know that these drugs are more powerful for patients who are not so poorly before you start the manufacturing. We know that, but yet we've not been able to do it and it's just going to take the time and the data to shake it out. So for me, probably the most exciting thing is we've crossed the precipice of clinical trials through to market authorization. And now we can slowly crawl back forwards through the clinical pathway and use it not as secondary or tertiary care, but potentially even primary care. Wouldn't it be amazing if in 5 years, a CAR T treatment was like a primary care for one or two indications, and I can see that happening within 10 years, definitely, definitely. So that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to in that period. And the other thing is, I think, clearly CAR T's been huge. That's been the blockbuster. That's the one where we've got some of this data. We've got some of the TIL stuff coming through. Recently people have been pointing me at some of the sickle cell work, which is where we're using some gene editing to splice and fix single base pair errors in somebody's bone marrow. I mean, GSK did this already. They did it for the SCID, for the orphan disease, and really impressive work from them. A few years back, and that was the first ever, approved gene therapy. And yes, that was for an orphan treatment. And yes, we, they parked that program because it served its purpose. It demonstrated this was doable. And I totally expect within the next 5 years we'll have amazing indications coming out of the gene therapy space as well. And so I think it's three things. I think it's more like first line care. It's going to be maybe TIL come through a lot more, because really for us to hit more solid tumors would be amazing. But then also more, gene therapy with more than mere orphan designation, with more mass market approval. And that's going to happen within 10 years, all three of those.
For sure, for sure. And the red thread there is really access. It's access for patients, right? You want earlier in the treatment pathway. We want more patients to get access to these therapies. We don't then have to be so sick by the time they get a chance to access what might be a curative therapy. Opening up access to gene therapies. All these things have to do. They sort of come back to our mission as a company, which is really enabling patient access. If we do our job right, more patients will get access. More patients will get a positive clinical outcome. And that's absolutely the ambition in the 5-year time frame. And then beyond that, we'll solve some of the harder problems in the 10-year time frame. So I love that ambition. I think it's completely in keeping with our mission as a company, and ultimately why we get out of bed every morning is really to have that patient impact and to manufacture brighter futures, as we say. Just the last kind of final question, final thought for you. Obviously, you're hiring. I think you've got 10 or 15 people that you're out there looking for, the best and brightest to join your team. I think across the organization, we have maybe 20 or 30 openings. So, as you said, anyone that's interested in cell and gene therapy, interested in new technologies, please reach out. We'd love to talk to you. What advice would you give folks that are maybe a little bit earlier in their career? There's a lot of discussions around, the kind of talent gap. There's just not enough of the highly skilled people that we think we need to move forward. And whether they're maybe in high school or going into uni or in university, kind of where, what would you give? What advice would you give to those folks about how to get into the field, or what they should be thinking about as they look across the domains that they could take their career, the paths they could go down?
I think be curious would be number one. I think that the amount of information out there, the access to information that we've got is insane. I think that when I look in sort of very much in the engineering disciplines, especially when it comes to, people who are more interested in software or electronics, it's amazing the hobbyist equipment and the ecosystems and the things that you can get involved with are out there, and they're super cheap, and $20 will buy you a microcomputer, which, when I was at that stage in my life, I would have, ripped an arm off. It is insane. So I would say, for me, generally, the thread that I see coming through the best people that I've had the fortune of working with, and the people who I enjoy working with the most, are people who have a passion and a hobby for what they do, not just at work, but at home. And you see it come through. And so much of what we do is transferable into other areas. If you're curious and you enjoy these technical challenges, and you enjoy reading up on things, you like detail, you want to learn, you're reading papers, the information is out there. And I'd say just get stuck in, don't hesitate. And, don't wait for anybody to give you permission. Just choose something and run at it.
No, it's great advice. And I think, I graduated my undergrad with a degree in political science, which doesn't give you a very obvious career path potentially. My father would have said if I'd studied harder in undergrad, I wouldn't have had to go to grad school, which I might take issue with, but on a different podcast. But my son's thinking about, he's 11 and he's like, Dad, I think I want to be an engineer. I'm like, that is a fantastic idea because the thing about being an engineer is there's so much breadth. There's so many things you could do. A software engineer versus a structural engineer versus a biochemical engineer. Those are totally different areas, and there's such breadth there. We are hiring in across engineering domains, software programming, data science. Some of the most challenging, most competitive hiring markets that have ever been seen in these areas. The demand is absolutely there and will be there moving forward. So, that's my sort of quick note to anyone out there is go into one of those fields where it gives you a breadth and depth of expertise that's applicable across lots of domains. And to the point you raised, something you love, something you're passionate about, because that'll make it easy. It'll make it easy to go to work every day. Well, Stu, I think it's been our hour is up. Thank you so much for spending some time. Personally, I'm super excited that you've joined us at Ori, and thank you for all that you do for the company and for patients. And let's keep moving fast and see if we can get this solution to our partners in the hands of our partners as fast as possible.
No, thanks ever so much. Couldn't agree more. And it's in any direction I look, it's exciting. So yeah, really looking forward to you know hitting those milestones on that 5 and 10 year time frame we talked about. That's how I'm going to judge success.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and obviously we'll chat soon.